Tonight's notes look at global winds. So in class today we looked at local winds, winds that blow over small distances. Tonight we're going to look at global winds, which blow over larger distances across the entire globe. So a global wind is a wind that blows steadily over a long distance. These are very predictable winds, and they are also caused by unequal heating, just like local winds are. So global winds blow steadily over long distances, right? And they're caused by unequal heating because at the equator, the Earth gets more intense sunlight than it does at the poles. So we get hotter air here at the equator. We know when temperature goes up, pressure goes down. So we have low pressure at the equator, cold temperatures and high pressure at the poles, both of them. And so we would get air flowing from the poles to the equator. So we have unequal heating, more intense sunlight at the equator than the poles. So we get warmer temperatures and lower pressure at the equator. So if this was the only thing to it, this would be very simple, right? We would have winds blowing from the poles to the equator, air cycling back up to balance it out, and that would be that. But it can't be that simple. We have this other thing that affects the winds that's called the Coriolis effect. And this has to do with the Earth rotating underneath the air as it moves. So if the Earth didn't spin, like we just talked about, wind would blow from the poles, which we said was cold and had high pressure, to the equator, which is warm and has low pressure. But underneath the atmosphere, underneath this moving air, the Earth is spinning and it's rotating. And what this means is that the winds end up curving on the Earth's surface. So as the Earth rotates beneath the wind is trying to go straight south or straight north, but as it tries to go that way, the Earth literally moves underneath it. And the Earth is moving in this direction from left to right in this picture. So as this wind tries to go south, the Earth moves underneath it and causes the path of the wind to curve. So the Coriolis effect, right? So the Earth's rotation as the winds blow causes the winds to curve, right? And this is called the Coriolis effect. In the northern hemisphere, winds curve to the right. And the way I remember that is north has an R in it, and so does right. So northern hemisphere curves to the right. Southern hemisphere, the winds curve to the left. And we're going to do some practice with this in class tomorrow, practice drawing the way that the winds would curve in different hemispheres. And we'll do some stuff with globes where you guys will trace out how the winds blow. So as a result of the Coriolis effect and some other factors, these factors combine to create a predictable pattern of wind belts and calm areas around the Earth. And this diagram kind of shows it, and it's a little bit hard to see in the video, but if you download the Keynote, you can zoom in on this pretty easily. So we have calm areas at the equator, right? We call those the doldrums, and at 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. And those are called the horse latitudes. They're areas of really calm wind as well. Then we get our wind belts. We have trade winds here, prevailing westerlies, right? Remember, winds are always named for where they come from. These come from the west. And then polar easterlies. So for our notes, we can say that, so these are global wind belts. Right, so the Coriolis effect and other factors create a predictable pattern of wind belts and calm areas on the Earth. All right, so these winds blow steadily in these directions pretty much all the time. All right, so if you looked at a long-term average, the wind in this section of the Earth would be blowing from the west to the east. All right, quickly we'll just look at the calm areas. So we have calm areas. We have the doldrums. Oops. That's not what I wanted to do. We have the... Sorry for the technical difficulties. All right, well, there we go. Delete, shift cells up. Fantastic. We have the doldrums, which occur at the equator. All right, so this is an area of low pressure at the equator. And then we have horse latitudes occur at 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. These are an area of high pressure at 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. So those are our calm areas. All right, and the horse latitudes, there are a couple different stories about how they got their name. We'll talk about those in class. The doldrums was a place where if you were sailing a ship from Europe to the Americas, you did not want to get stuck there because your ship got caught in the doldrums and you were likely to be there for quite some time as you waited for the wind to pick back up or you waited for the currents to push you to an area with wind. And so our wind belts, we have our trade winds. These are easterly winds from the equator to 30 degrees. We have prevailing westerlies. These are westerly winds from 30 degrees to 60 degrees. And then our last wind belts are our polar easterlies. These are easterly winds from 60 degrees to the poles. And remember, these degrees that we're talking about here are degrees of latitude. All right, I know you guys have learned about those in geography. The equator is 0 degrees of latitude. You have 30 degrees north, or 30 degrees south rather, down here, 30 degrees north up here, 60 degrees north, 60 degrees south, and then the poles are 90. So if you look at the names of these winds, they're really helpful to help you remember what's going on. Prevailing westerlies, right? Those are a westerly wind. It's got it in the name. Polar easterlies are the best because it tells you where they are. They're at the poles, and the wind. It's an easterly wind, right? And they always rotate. So we go easterly, westerly, easterly, and then the same pattern in the southern hemisphere: easterly, westerly, easterly. All right, that is all there is for global winds. Make sure you write a summary and fill out the survey. You are not going to get credit for the homework unless you fill out the survey online. So don't miss out on your credit and make sure you get your stuff done. I will see you in class tomorrow.